Well, Peter always says to me, when you're about to start a talk, don't apologise for how rubbish you think it's going to be, or how short, or how long. So I'm sorry if it's too short or rubbish. So I've already disobeyed one thing, not that I obeyed Pete, but, you know. Yeah. So I think we had a vague conversation, Pete and I, and he said, when we talked about James, and then he said, well, we need somebody else to do the talk. What do you think? And I was like, yeah. All right then, you're down. You're doing it. But funnily enough, you know, when you say to God, God, I just lay myself down before you, he'll bring you the things, won't he? He'll bring you different opportunities. And I was looking at the little book that we've been using and reading through the notes. And I have to say that it wasn't easy. It was a little bit of a struggle. And there was nothing that really leapt out at me. And so I haven't completely avoided it, don't worry. It's still in the theme. But I've gone with my heart. And probably themes that any of the Minadon that team are here, they're probably like, yawn. We've heard you say these things before. But these are things that are just really passionate for me. And so I'm going to share them with you. So the title is actually Mary the Mother. And the ones we've done so far are Mary the Virgin, Mary the Fugitive, and Mary the Worshipper. I would have liked to do that one. I love worship. I'm sure you all do. We're all passionate about worship, aren't we? We love worshipping together and offering our lives as an act of worship. But Mary the Mother. I've changed the title to Ordinary Woman, but Extraordinary God. And you might think, well, if we're going to think more about Mary as a mother, is it going to be a talk really mostly aimed at mothers or mums or parents? Well, it's definitely not. It's a talk that's aimed at all of us, I hope anyway, and that there's something in it that will challenge or encourage each one of us. So I'm going to focus on the fact that she was an ordinary woman, a normal woman. She was a mum, yes, but she had an extraordinary calling from an extraordinary God. And there are 3 words which I think will thread through the talk. Last time I used an acrostic, but I'm not going to do that because the words were a bit too long, so if I did an acrostic for each, we would have been a long time. But the 3 words are these: ordinary, extraordinary, and the 3rd word, which will come towards the end, is the word surrender. It's really interesting because I didn't chat much with Josh, if at all, this week. That's not because I avoid him or anything like that, and we didn't liaise. And this has happened to me so many times when I've picked worship songs, and then I've listened to the talk, and then I've thought, wow, that's interesting. Well, I shouldn't really be surprised, should I? Because if you offer it to God as you're choosing or as you're doing your talk or whatever, he'll weave the threads together. And it's interesting that the words in the last couple of songs about the goodness of God and about giving your everything to him very much relate to this talk. So, going back to the beginning, I think Mary probably thought, even though she was so incredibly young, she probably thought her life was mapped out. It was organized. She knew what her life was going to hold. This young Jewish girl. She was going to get married. She was probably going to have children. She was going to build her home. That's how she thought it was going to be. And then the angel appeared. In Luke chapter 1 and verse 28, it says, the angel appeared and said, greetings to you, you are highly favored. The Lord is with you. Mary was greatly troubled. Personally, I think that is another way of saying Mary was completely freaked out. Now, I guess we've said it before, haven't we, that about Mary and the angel. I don't know. Did they pop up all the time around that time? Did they have constant conversations with angels, so it was just normal? I don't know. But if an angel appeared to me and said, Susie, you are highly favored, don't be troubled, I wouldn't be like, oh, cool, thanks. I'd be really pretty freaked out. But you know what happened next? The angel said, don't be afraid. Remember the talk that Andy gave? Hang on to that phrase, don't be afraid. You are favored, you'll conceive a son, and so on. And she said, how on earth is this all going to happen? But eventually, she said, come on then, yeah, let's go for it. Or something along those lines. I think I may have paraphrased. So as I've said, when you think about it, it's just such a crazy story, isn't it? There was this young, ordinary girl with her life mapped out, thinking that things were going to go a particular way, having a chat with an angel. But I think that's the first point that I want to make. I believe that God wanted to remind us that he can take the ordinary and he can make it extraordinary. He can take what looks like just everyday circumstances, and then he can make his purposes happen, because he's an awesome and amazing God. So I just want to break it to you just gently. We are ordinary people. Now, I know all the stuff about we're unique and we're wonderfully made and all of those things, but each one of us, we're just ordinary people, aren't we, going about our everyday lives. But we do have an extraordinary God. And he says to us that today, this day, and amazing how this also fits in with what was spoken earlier and with Advent and hope. Today, you and I, ordinary people, we're the hope. We need to take the message of hope. We, his church. It's our job now, yours and mine as his church, to carry the good news of Jesus to our generation. Mary, just ordinary Mary, young Mary. She was so young. We work a lot with young people, and I can't imagine them at 13, 14, 15, however old Mary was, how they'd have felt. Girls, imagine it, to be in that situation. And I do wonder sometimes what thoughts actually went through her mind. Really? Me? Why me? I'm too poor. I'm just too young. But she was called to bring forward Jesus, to birth him, if you like, to bring him for the world. And in the same way, kind of, we're called to bring Jesus to the world. We're called to be salt, and we're called to be light in our time. But the first thing we need to do is accept that God uses ordinary people like you and me. We could sit back and wait for him to, or wait for somebody who's way more magnificent than we are, or we think they are anyway, and say, use them, I'm too ordinary. But no, God says, I want to use you, ordinary people. The thing about Mary was that she was a young girl, but she had a willing heart. You know, Pete has a saying that he's often used in some of his talks, and I'm sure, again, there are those that have heard this many times. One of his favorites, I think. It's not your ability, it's your availability. So you just need to say yes. Mary said yes, didn't she? Whatever the thoughts, whatever the doubts, whatever the fears, she said yes. I wonder what you're going to say. One of the things that the angel said to Mary was, you have found favor with God. That's in Luke 1, verse 30. And God says to us that we are favored. We're favored because he calls us his children. In 1 John 3, it says this, How great is the love that the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are. Listen to that word, lavished. He didn't just say, oh, I love you. He lavished his love on us, and he calls us his children. That is so precious, isn't it, to be called his children? But what is this favor? Is it that he's favored us so that we can now just be comfy? We can sit in our comfy chairs. We can sit back and say, God, I'm favored. No, it's not that at all. Being favored is not for status. It's for service. It's so that we can serve a lost and broken world. And I wonder sometimes whether we'd quite like life to be easy, cozy. And God is saying that our yes to him might just turn our whole life upside down. You know, when I first met Pete, quite a long time ago now, I know we don't look that old, but, you know, it was a few years ago. As I got to know him, I saw that his heart was set on being a teacher. That was his plan. That's what he was passionate about, was teaching. He was going to be a teacher. And I think in his mind he probably thought, yeah, my life and career is mapped out. I'm going to teach, probably in the Northwest. Lots of his family were teachers. It was a family thing. But what happened was he said yes to Jesus. You've probably heard the story. I took him along to church one day. It was a charismatic church, and he'd been brought up in the Catholic Church. And he sat there thinking, what on earth's going on here? And at the end of the service, this lovely man turned to Pete and said, I feel God is telling me to speak to you. I was sitting on the other side thinking, I feel we need to get out of here now, quick, because Pete's going to go crazy. But Pete turned to this guy and said, you're right, I need to know, what is this joy? What's going on in this place? And Pete said yes to Jesus. And guess what happened? Pete's life got turned upside down because he said yes. Wherever you want to take me, I'm willing to go. Sometimes there may have been a little bit of, really? But God called Pete and God called me. And sometimes it has turned our lives upside down. But the point is, are you willing to see that God calls you? He favors you. He loves you. But maybe, just maybe, if you say yes to your carefully laid, comfortable plans, God might turn it all upside down. And perhaps some of us are afraid of that, and you know, who can blame you? Because you think, I don't want my life to be. I'm quite happy with where I am. But you need to remember back to that earlier message I was talking about before, where God says, don't be afraid. The angel said that to Mary, and God is saying it to you too. In 2 Timothy it says this, a well-known verse, for God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, of love, and self-discipline. You can explore the self-discipline one another time. But not a spirit of fear. And you know, maybe you worry that your limitations or your brokenness mean that God can't use you. I'm going to tell you the truth, that I often feel like that. I feel quite inadequate. But again, it's not about what I can't do. It's about what God can do. It's his supernatural ability and my availability. And one of the things that I've seen over the years so many times is that impossible is often where God starts. You look at a situation, maybe you've been praying for it for years, and you think it's impossible, and God says, give it to me, let's see what we can do. And then maybe you think, well, I'm not talented enough, I'm not gifted enough, I'm not resourced enough, I'm not educated enough. And maybe you feel, I'm just weak and I'm just worried. But guess what? When you are weak, then he is strong. And when you simply say yes and offer yourself and all that you are, with all your flaws, all your failings, all your gifts and all your abilities, all your weakness and all your worries. Put it into God's hand. And even in brokenness, he will use you if you offer him the broken pieces. You know, there's somebody in my life, my mum, who's gone now. She's promoted to glory a few years ago. She was broken. She was a broken person. I was chatting with somebody about that this week. She was broken in so many ways, and she had so many struggles. But my word, did God use her, because she time and time again said, she knew she was broken, said, God, will you use me? And he used her with bereaved parents. He used her with in women's ministry, didn't he? He touched people's lives with a broken person. But the reason was because every time she felt inadequate, she said to God, here I am. Just take me as I am. And maybe you think you're too young, too poor, or you feel inadequate. Maybe you think, well, I'm not the one to do this. I don't have a degree in whatever it is you need to have a degree in. And also, by the way, God, I get depressed. Also, I really struggle with this or that or the other. God still says, come to me. Don't be afraid. I wonder how Mary actually felt as a mum. She was a mum to Jesus, yes, but she had more children. Going on my own experience and other mums that I do chat to, it's quite hard being a mum, you know. It's amazing, it's awesome, but you passionately love your children with feelings that are quite hard to express at times. But you know, Mary knew that she had this extraordinary calling. And Mary had to recognize that this child that she had so fiercely loved had to be released to his calling. You know, even when she felt confused and found it painful, she kept on following him. She kept on watching what she knew God was going to do through him. And we can do the same if we daily do what Mary did, and that's surrender. She said, I am your servant. It was never easy. You know, there was some incidents for Mary which must have been quite difficult. For example, when they lost him and he was left behind in the temple, you'll find it in Luke chapter 2. You know, he was in full flow in his father's house, and they didn't know where he was, and he just said, well, I'm in my father's house. So that must have been quite difficult, I think, and quite confusing for Mary and for Joseph. And then the other time when they came to him, and in Matthew 12, and they said, he was told that his mother and his brothers were waiting, and he said, who are my mother and my brothers? That anyone who does my Father's will is my family. I think when you think about that, did it hurt them? Maybe did Mary as a mum think that's quite painful? I don't know. It wasn't easy, was it? But she kept on surrendering herself to him. I wonder, on a slightly different note, whether sometimes we just get comfortable. We just think, I know how it works now. I know this routine of following Jesus. I turn up on a Sunday. I sit in a relatively comfortable seat. We sing some worship songs, which is lovely, and music lifts our hearts. We love being together because we're family, but it's just ever so comfortable. Maybe once, a little while ago, some time ago, we took a little bit of a risk. We stepped out with something. We thought, well, I will talk to my friends and tell them that I go to church and love Jesus. Or I will get to know my neighbour and share my faith with them. We took a little bit of a risk, but that was a little while ago. Someone once said, don't let fear take the wheel and drive you away from where God wants you to go. God is inviting you and me to floor it with your faith. You know, all the way through the Bible, It's the same. Ordinary people who said yes to God. Take Noah. He was building an ark. And the people were saying, Noah, what are you doing? And by the way, what's an ark? And, well, it's going to rain. Oh, really? So where is this rain? And then take Moses. He was hemmed in, wasn't he? He could either go forward and take a swim, or he could get destroyed by the pursuing Egyptians. But he did have a very useful thing. He had a stick. Take Sarah at 90. No babies at 90, surely. Maybe it's bad enough at 30-something, I don't know. The Israelites marched around this wall. You haven't got any guns, you haven't got anything that you might usually have. Just march around and blow some trumpets. And, you know, there's always worship and music when God's going to do amazing things. But what on earth were they doing? Take David. You can't kill a giant with a tiny slingshot, surely. And how about Esther? She went into the king when she wasn't even summoned. That was a very risky thing to do. What about Mary? She was pregnant as a virgin. What about the wise men? They just followed a star. Well, that's a bit crazy, isn't it? The wise men following a star. And what about Peter? Why on earth would you leave the comfort of the boat in a raging storm? Why would you do that? Or take a small boy. Why would you believe that for thousands of people, 2 fishes and 5 loaves were going to feed them? They might feed a family of 5, but they're not going to feed 5,000. All these people, and I could have named you more, as I'm sure you could also do, they just looked kind of foolish. But you know what they had done and what they did eventually? They said yes. They said yes to God. They knew that if they did what God was telling them to do, if they followed him, if they answered his call, that he would provide the way. And look what he did. Let's just look at it again. Noah and his family were saved. Moses did see the Red Sea part. Sarah did give birth to Isaac. The Israelites saw the walls come tumbling down. David defeated Goliath. Esther stopped the genocide. Mary did give birth to Jesus. The wise men followed the star and found the Messiah. Paul and Silas were freed in the jail when they were singing their worship songs. And a small lunch fed 5,000 people. And do you know what? Do you know why? Because they stepped out. Because they said yes. The risk was saying yes. And then God did the rest. I think if you were looking for cozy, slick, comfortable Christianity, then you're not looking in the right places, because God is looking for faith-filled people who will, as Mary did, offer themselves in his service. If you feel ordinary, weak, well, it's okay. I feel like that all the time. But God is extraordinary. Do you feel broken? It's okay. Because God loves to mend. And he loves using broken people. If you come to God and say, God, I just feel broken, God says, come on, I'm going to use you. You might be thinking, what does this actually really mean for me? Does it mean that I'm going to have to say yes, and then God is going to turn my life so upside down that I'm going to end up in darkest Africa or something? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It might mean that he calls you off to do something that's radically different than is in your current thoughts and plan. It might. But what I believe it means is that every day, every single day, we say to God, I surrender myself to your plans today. And in this day, there might just be something that you want me to step out into. Maybe it's a conversation, and everything in me is telling me in this conversation to talk about Jesus. And everything in me is saying, it's embarrassing, I can't do it. But God is just saying, just say yes. Maybe for a while, God has been saying to you, try this. What about going and getting to know your neighbor better? What about offering yourself more to serve in the church? What about whatever it is, something that's just been niggling away at you? And what God is looking for is for you to take that step out. And again, a phrase that we often use, that it's for an audience of one. You're not looking for the praises of the crowd. You're not looking for everyone to go, wow, look at that. You did good there. But God sees it. He sees it when you say to him, God, I say yes to you today. You know, it was Mary and the angel. She didn't say, hang on, angel, let me get everybody in the town together so they can all see and hear and see what I'm saying. She just said, with the angel and before God, I am your servant. So whatever it is he's asking you to do, to reach out to someone, to serve more, to love more, or maybe it's to lay something down. And God is saying that thing is getting in the way. It's just taking up so much time and not giving you a chance to say yes to the thing that I've really laid on your heart. And maybe it's just simply that God is saying, go out of your way to bless others. Or maybe what he's saying to you, just to bring it right back down to Mary as a mum, is if you're a mum and you're worrying and you're struggling, bring it to me. Let me help you. Let me help you to be a better parent, a better mum. All the worries, you don't need to do it. We all worry about our children if we're parents. But God is saying that's not faith. Keep bringing them to me all the time. On my word, that's a message for me, to keep praying for my children. And it's the same for you. I'm not saying it's easy. The thing with surrendering ourselves, our lives, is a living sacrifice, is we tend to get up and run off, don't we? And the other thing is, there may be days when you simply crash and burn. You think, I'm going to step out, I'm going to take the risk, and then it just all goes wrong. And you think, well, I'm not doing that again. I'm not going to try that again. But if you crash and burn, God is not there going, ha ha ha, that's ridiculous, you did so bad, just don't bother. He's saying, I love you, get up, come on. Let's collect the broken pieces up and we'll walk on together. So don't not take risks because you might crash and burn. Take risks because God is calling you to take risks for him. You may have skills and you may have qualifications and gifts. You should definitely keep offering them with open hands to God. But he may just use you because you've brought the smallest offering. 5 loaves and 2 fishes, the smallest offering. And you'll be amazed because he's extraordinary, what he can do with what we bring to him. And where do you lay it? You lay it at the foot of the cross. You know, for Mary as a mum, that's the most remarkable part, isn't it, of the story? She saw her son give up his life. She watched her son die, and everything inside of her must have been, oh, what that pain must have been like. And yet deep down, she knew, she must have known that Jesus was doing what he was called to do. And as a mother, she had to surrender, even at that most difficult moment. So I want to challenge you this morning to surrender to him again today. There may just be one thing that God is saying to you. Lay this down. There may be just something that he's urging you with. Step out. Don't let your faith. Maybe you don't even need your faith because it's too comfortable. We need faith to believe for what we do not see. And God is saying to you, step out. What's he calling you to do? He's calling you to love him with all your heart and to serve him and to honor him and to surrender to him. And then see what God will do. We're ordinary, but he's extraordinary. And he can do extraordinary things with you if you surrender to him. So our world is broken and hurting. We can see it, we hear it. But there's so much hope that we can take because of Jesus. But it's down to me and you. We're on his team. So we need to get out there. We need to take those risks. It doesn't have to be a giant, massive step. It could be just a little risk that leads to you being brave enough and having faith to step out more and more and more. You need to be his light today. Mary birthed Jesus. We're bringing Jesus, the hope of the world. It's our job to do it in this generation. A few weeks ago, with the Growing Leaders course, I showed this PowerPoint, and we're going to finish with this. I'm going to pray, and then we're going to finish with this PowerPoint, which is called Surrender. So God, I want to thank you for the lessons that we can learn from Mary. Thank you that she said yes, even though she must have been, had all sorts of feelings of fear and so on. But Lord, she said yes to you. And thank you for all the characters in the Bible that in crazy circumstances did the same. And Lord, we so often just think we can't do it. We don't have what is needed. But you are an extraordinary God, and an awesome and amazing God who wants to use us. You want to use us whether we're young, uneducated and poor, or whether we're educated and wealthy, and whatever it is, you just want us to bring our all and surrender it to you. And I pray that each one in this room will feel that urge to surrender to you again this morning, and then to take the light and hope of you, the message of Jesus, out into the world. Amen.
Hi there, we just wanted to say thank you for watching our live stream broadcast or recording and being part of our Sunday gathering here at Towing Baptist Church. Whether you're watching it live or watching later in the week, we're just really glad that you could join us. We know it's not possible for everybody to be here in person at the moment, but if there was a week when you can get along, well, we'd be absolutely delighted to welcome you. If it's not possible for you to be here, but would like somebody from the church to get in touch with you, please just give us a call or send us an email. The details are on the website. It would also be great to hear how you feel that these broadcasts are working, or if you have any ideas as to how they might be improved. But once again, thank you for watching, and we hope you can join with us again very soon.